They thought I was the family failure until I revealed I'd inherited 2 children and a multi-million-dollar empire. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 30 years old, and until last Christmas, my family saw me as the disappointment who chose career over motherhood. I work as a financial advisor in downtown Chicago, spending my days helping wealthy clients manage their investments while my own family questioned every choice I'd made. The snow was falling heavily outside my cousin Rebecca's house in suburban Naperville as I pulled into the driveway that Christmas Eve. The warm glow from the windows and the sound of children's laughter drifting through the cold air made my chest tighten. Another year, another family gathering where I'd be the odd one out. I sat in my car for a moment, watching through the frosted windows as my relatives moved around inside. My sister Emma was probably already showing off photos of her twin boys to anyone who'd listen. My brother Mark would be discussing his daughter's acceptance to Northwestern. And me? I'd be fielding the same questions about when I was going to settle down and give Mom some grandchildren. The irony wasn't lost on me. If only they knew what had happened 3 months ago. I grabbed the bottle of expensive wine from my passenger seat and the carefully wrapped presents from my trunk. The cold Chicago wind cut through my wool coat as I walked up the familiar path lined with twinkling lights. Before I could even knock, the door swung open. "Sarah, finally!" Rebecca beamed, pulling me into a warm hug that smelled like cinnamon and vanilla. "We were starting to worry you'd gotten stuck in the snow. Just running a bit behind," I said, forcing a smile as I stepped into the warmth. The house was exactly as I remembered from childhood gatherings. Garland draped along the banister, a massive Christmas tree dominating the living room, and the comforting chaos of family everywhere. "Look who's here," Rebecca announced to the room, and suddenly I was surrounded by the familiar faces I'd grown up with. My mother appeared first, her silver hair perfectly styled despite the kitchen heat. "Sweetheart, you look thin. Are you eating enough?" She squeezed my hands, her eyes already scanning me with that maternal concern that somehow always felt more like judgment. "I'm fine, Mom. Just busy with work. Always work with you," my father chimed in from his spot by the fireplace, not looking up from his conversation with Uncle Jim. "When I was your age, I already had 3 kids and a mortgage. Here we go," I thought, hanging my coat in the familiar closet that still smelled like my grandmother's lavender sachets. Emma appeared next, her husband trailing behind with their 4-year-old twins. "Sarah. The boys have been asking about Aunt Sarah all week." She looked radiant in that way that mothers always seem to at family gatherings, like she was glowing from some inner satisfaction I'd never understood. "They're getting so big," I said, crouching down to hug my nephews. Their sticky fingers immediately found my hair, and I couldn't help but laugh. "What have you 2 been eating?" "Cookies," they chorused, and Emma rolled her eyes good-naturedly. "Don't get them more wound up than they already are," she warned, but she was smiling. "How's the single life treating you? Still married to that job of yours?" The question hit exactly where it was supposed to. Emma had never been cruel about it, but there was always that underlying assumption that I was missing out on something essential, something that made life complete. "Work's going well," I said simply, standing up and smoothing down my dress. "Really well, actually." Mark joined our little circle, beer in hand, and that easy confidence that came from having everything figured out by 35. "Sarah, how's my favorite workaholic sister?" "Your only workaholic sister," I corrected, accepting his one-armed hug. "True. But seriously, when are you going to slow down and think about the important things? Like giving Mom those grandchildren she keeps hinting about?" My mother's ears perked up from across the room. Did someone mention grandchildren? And just like that, I was surrounded. It was like a well-rehearsed dance we performed every year. Them pushing, me deflecting. Everyone pretending it was all good-natured family ribbing when we all knew it cut deeper than that. "You know, Sarah," my Aunt Linda said, appearing with a glass of wine and that particular smile that meant she was about to say something she thought was helpful. "My neighbor's son is a doctor. Very handsome, never been married. I could introduce you." "That's sweet, Aunt Linda, but I'm really not looking right now." "But you're 30!" my cousin Jennifer exclaimed, as if I'd somehow forgotten. "Don't you want children? A family of your own?" The room had grown quieter, and I could feel all eyes on me. This was the moment that happened every year, when the gentle teasing turned into something more serious, more pointed, when they all looked at me with that mixture of pity and confusion, like I was a puzzle they couldn't solve. "I mean," Jennifer continued, What's the point of all that success if you don't have anyone to share it with? No legacy? No one to pass things down to? My chest tightened, and for a moment, I felt that familiar sting of being the outsider in my own family. But this year was different. This year, I had something they didn't know about. I took a sip of wine and looked around at their expectant faces. Actually, I said quietly, there's something I need to tell you all. The room fell silent except for the crackling of the fireplace and the distant sound of children playing in the basement. Every face was turned toward me, curiosity replacing the gentle mockery that had filled the air moments before. I set my wine glass down on the coffee table, my hands steadier than I'd expected them to be. For 3 months, I'd been carrying this secret, this life-changing reality that had turned everything I thought I knew about myself upside down. You remember my best friend from college, Jessica Chen? I began, my voice cutting through the quiet. My mother nodded slowly. Of course, dear. Such a lovely girl. You two were inseparable. Didn't she move to San Francisco after graduation? She did. I took a breath, feeling the weight of what I was about to share. She started a tech company there, built it from nothing into something incredible. But she also... I paused, the familiar ache settling in my chest. She got sick. Pancreatic cancer. Very aggressive. Emma's hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God, Sarah, when? She was diagnosed 18 months ago. She fought it hard, but... I shook my head, the memory of those final weeks still raw. She passed away 3 months ago. The room erupted in soft murmurs of sympathy. My mother moved closer, her earlier criticism forgotten in the face of genuine concern. Sweetheart, why didn't you tell us? We would have been there for you. Because it wasn't just about losing Jessica, I said, my voice growing stronger. She had 2 children, Lily, who's 8, and Marcus, who's 6. Their father died in a car accident when Marcus was just a baby. Jessica was all they had. Uncle Jim leaned forward in his chair. What happened to them? This was the moment that would change how my family saw me forever. She asked me to take them, legally. I've been their guardian for 3 months now. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched as the information processed across their faces. Confusion, shock, and something that might have been respect. You adopted them, Emma whispered. Legally, yes. Jessica had been planning it for months before she died. She knew she was running out of time, and she didn't want them going into the system or to distant relatives they barely knew. She trusted me. Mark was the first to find his voice. Sarah, that's incredible. But how are you managing? I mean, you work 60-hour weeks. How do you take care of 2 kids? I almost smiled at that. It was such a typical Mark question. Practical, focused on the logistics rather than the emotional weight of it all. I've made some changes. Cut back my client load. Hired a nanny for after school. It's been an adjustment, but we're figuring it out. Where are they now? My mother asked, and I could see her grandmother instincts already kicking in. They're with Mrs. Rodriguez, our neighbor. She's watching them tonight so I could come here. I wasn't sure how to explain everything. Jennifer, who had been so vocal about my lack of legacy just minutes before, looked stunned. I can't believe you didn't tell us. We've been giving you grief about not having children, and you've been raising 2 kids on your own. It's complicated, I admitted. I'm still learning how to be what they need. Some days I feel like I'm drowning, and other days... I paused, thinking about Lily helping Marcus with his homework the night before, about the way they both ran to hug me when I got home from work. Other days I can't imagine my life without them. Rebecca, ever the hostess, was already in problem-solving mode. Well, they should be here. This is family Christmas. Why didn't you bring them? Because I wasn't sure how you'd all react, I said honestly. And because there's more. The room, which had just started to buzz with excited chatter about meeting the children, fell quiet again. More? My father asked, speaking up for the first time since my announcement. I nodded, feeling the weight of Jessica's final gift settling on my shoulders again. Jessica didn't just leave me her children. She left me everything. Her house in Palo Alto, her company, her investments, everything. The silence stretched longer this time. I could practically see the mental calculations happening behind their eyes. Her company, Mark said slowly. What kind of company? Tech consulting. She specialized in helping traditional businesses transition to digital platforms. When she died, the company was valued at just over $12 million. Emma's wine glass slipped from her fingers, but Rebecca caught it before it could hit the floor. 12 million? The house alone is worth 3 million. The company, her investment portfolio, the life insurance policies she'd set up for the kids' education. I shrugged, still not quite believing it myself. Let's just say I won't be worrying about college tuition. My Aunt Linda, who had been so concerned about my unmarried status just minutes before, was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. You're a millionaire? I'm a guardian, I corrected firmly. The money is for Lily and Marcus, for their future, their education, their security. I'm just the steward of it until they're old enough to inherit it themselves. But even as I said it, I knew that wasn't entirely true. Jessica had been very specific in her will. The house was mine outright. A significant portion of the company shares were mine to keep. She'd made sure I would be financially secure enough to give her children the life she'd wanted for them. "This is incredible, Sarah," my mother said, and for the first time in years, I heard something in her voice that sounded like pride. "You've taken on such a responsibility, such a gift." "It doesn't feel like a gift most days," I admitted. "It feels like the biggest challenge of my life, but Jessica believed I could do it. She believed I could be what they needed." My father stood up from his chair and walked over to me. For a moment, I thought he might lecture me about the practical challenges ahead, about how unprepared I was for parenthood. Instead, he pulled me into a hug. "I'm proud of you," he said quietly, and I felt tears prick at my eyes. Taking on 2 grieving children, honoring your friend's trust like that, it takes courage. As the family began to crowd around me with questions and congratulations, I felt something shift in the room. The dynamic that had defined every family gathering for the past decade, me as the outsider, the one who'd chosen wrong, was changing. But even as I basked in their newfound respect and acceptance, I knew this was just the beginning of the story, because what I hadn't told them yet was how much my life had really changed, and how much more complicated things were about to become. The questions came fast and furious after that. Where were the children living? How were they adjusting? What was I going to do about work? My family, who had spent years treating my career success as a consolation prize for my lack of personal life, suddenly wanted to know every detail about how I was managing both. "You have to bring them to New Year's," Emma insisted, already planning. "The boys would love to have cousins to play with." "Cousins," I repeated, the word catching in my throat. "Well, of course," my mother said, as if it were obvious. "They're your children now, which makes them part of this family." The casual acceptance hit me harder than I'd expected. For 3 months, I'd been navigating this new reality largely alone, second-guessing every decision, wondering if I was doing right by Lily and Marcus. To hear my family simply accept them as part of our clan felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. "There's something else," I said, knowing I needed to tell them everything while I had the courage. "About Jessica's company." Mark raised an eyebrow. "What about it?" "She didn't just leave it to me to manage. She left me specific instructions. The company has been operating without her for 3 months, but there are some major decisions that need to be made. Expansion opportunities, acquisition offers, strategic partnerships." "And you're qualified to make those decisions?" Uncle Jim asked, not unkindly, but with the skepticism of someone who'd spent 40 years in manufacturing. I couldn't help but smile at that. "Actually, yes. Jessica and I stayed close after college. I've been consulting for her company for the past 5 years, helping with their financial strategy. She didn't just pick me to raise her kids because we were friends. She picked me because she knew I could handle both responsibilities." "Both responsibilities?" Rebecca asked. "The children and the business." She wanted someone who could grow the company while giving Lily and Marcus stability. Someone who understood both worlds. My father was looking at me with new eyes. "So you're not just inheriting money. You're inheriting a business to run." "Exactly. And it's not just any business. Jessica's company has contracts with some of the biggest corporations in Silicon Valley. We're talking about potentially expanding to the East Coast, maybe even internationally." The room had gone quiet again, but this time it felt different. Instead of the awkward silence that usually accompanied discussions of my life choices, this felt like respect, like they were finally seeing me as someone who had built something meaningful. "How are you managing it all?" Emma asked softly. I can barely handle my part-time job and the twins. I can't imagine running a company and raising 2 kids who aren't even yours. They are mine, I said firmly, surprising myself with the intensity in my voice. Maybe not biologically, but they're mine in every way that matters. And as for managing it all, I paused, thinking about the chaos of the past 3 months. I'm learning. Some days are harder than others. What's the hardest part? My mother asked, and I could see genuine concern in her eyes. I considered the question carefully. The guilt, I admitted. Lily and Marcus lost their mother. They're grieving, they're scared, and they're trying to adjust to a completely new life. Meanwhile, I'm trying to learn how to be a parent while also making decisions that affect hundreds of employees and millions of dollars. Some days I feel like I'm failing at both. But you're not failing, Rebecca said firmly. You're doing something incredible. Am I? I asked, voicing the doubt that had been eating at me for months. Sometimes I wonder if Jessica made the right choice. If maybe the kids would have been better off with someone who actually knew how to be a mother. Do they seem happy? My father asked. I thought about Lily's smile when I'd helped her with her science project the week before, about Marcus climbing into my lap during movie night, about the way they both called me Sarah Mom when they were feeling particularly affectionate. Most of the time, yes, I said. They have their moments. They miss Jessica terribly, and they're still processing everything. But they're resilient, stronger than I expected. Then you're doing something right, he said simply. Jennifer, who had been unusually quiet since my revelation, finally spoke up. What about dating? I mean, you're 30, you're successful, you're basically a millionaire now, but you also have 2 kids. That's got to complicate things. I laughed, but there wasn't much humor in it. Dating is the last thing on my mind right now. I'm trying to figure out how to help an 8-year-old girl who misses her mom and a 6-year-old boy who has nightmares. Romance feels pretty irrelevant. But eventually, Emma pressed. I mean, you might want to find someone to share this with. Someone to help you. Maybe, I said, though I couldn't imagine it. Right now, though, it's just the 3 of us figuring it out together. My mother reached over and squeezed my hand. You know we're here to help, don't you? I know we haven't always been supportive of your choices, but this is different. You're doing something beautiful, Sarah. The words hit me harder than I'd expected. For years, I'd felt like the disappointment in the family, the one who'd chosen career over the traditional path. To hear my mother not just accept, but praise my choices felt like a fundamental shift in our relationship. There's one more thing, I said, knowing I might as well lay all my cards on the table. Jessica left me a letter. Instructions, really, about what she wanted for the kids, for the company, for everything. What kind of instructions? Mark asked. She wants me to move to California, to Palo Alto, where her house is, where the company is headquartered. She thought it would be better for the kids to stay in familiar surroundings, and better for the business if I was there in person. The room fell silent again. This time I could see the implications sinking in for everyone. If I moved to California, I wouldn't just be changing my life. I'd be leaving theirs. When? My mother asked quietly. Soon. Probably after the new year. I've been commuting back and forth for 3 months, but it's not sustainable. The kids need stability, and the company needs leadership. That's across the country, Emma said, stating the obvious. I know, but it's what Jessica wanted. And honestly, it makes sense. Chicago is my life, but it's not theirs. Their friends are in California, their schools, their memories of their mother. My father nodded slowly. It sounds like you've thought this through. I've thought about little else for 3 months, I admitted. It's terrifying. Starting over in a new city, running a company I'm still learning about, raising kids I'm still getting to know. But it also feels right, like this is what I'm supposed to be doing. As I looked around the room at my family's faces, I saw something I'd never seen before when discussing my life choices. Understanding, maybe even admiration. But I also saw something else, the beginning of goodbye. The rest of Christmas Eve passed in a blur of questions, advice, and something I'd never experienced at a family gathering before, genuine interest in my life. My cousins wanted to know about Silicon Valley. My aunts peppered me with questions about the children, and my parents seemed to be seeing me as an adult for the first time in years. But it was the quiet conversation I had with my mother later that night that really stayed with me. I was helping her clean up in the kitchen while the rest of the family watched It's a Wonderful Life in the living room. The familiar sounds of Jimmy Stewart's voice and my family's laughter drifted through the doorway as we worked in comfortable silence. "I owe you an apology," my mother said suddenly, not looking up from the dishes she was washing. "For what?" "For not understanding. For all those years of pushing you to settle down, to have children, to follow the path I thought was right." She paused, her hands still in the soapy water. "I thought you were missing out on the most important things in life. I thought you were choosing work over happiness." I dried a plate carefully, considering my words. "You weren't entirely wrong, Mom. I was choosing work. I just didn't know there was another option. But there was, wasn't there? You were building something. Building yourself into the kind of person who could handle this responsibility when it came." The insight surprised me. I'd never thought about it that way. That all those years of focusing on my career, of building my expertise and my confidence, had been preparing me for this moment. "Jessica used to say that," I admitted. In her letter, she wrote that she'd been watching me for years, seeing how I handled pressure, how I made decisions under stress. She said she knew I could do this because of who I'd become, not in spite of it. My mother finally looked at me, her eyes bright with unshed tears. She was right, and I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. We finished the dishes in silence, but it was a different kind of quiet now, peaceful, understanding. When I got home to my apartment that night, I found Mrs. Rodriguez waiting up for me with a cup of tea and a knowing smile. "How did it go, mija?" she asked in her gentle accent. Mrs. Rodriguez had become my lifeline over the past 3 months. A retired teacher who lived next door and had immediately taken Lily and Marcus under her wing. "Better than expected," I said, sinking into my couch with exhaustion. "They took it well. Better than well, actually." "And the children? They were good?" "Angels, as always." Lily helped Marcus with a puzzle, and they both went to bed without any fuss. They asked about you, though, when you were coming home. The word home still caught me off guard sometimes. This apartment had been my sanctuary for 5 years, but it had never felt like home the way it did now, with Lily's artwork on the refrigerator and Marcus's toy cars scattered across the coffee table. "I'll go check on them," I said, but Mrs. Rodriguez was already gathering her things. "They're sleeping peacefully." Lily read to Marcus before bed, that book about the mouse and the motorcycle. She's getting so good at reading. After Mrs. Rodriguez left, I tiptoed into the kids' room. I'd converted my home office into a bedroom for them, buying bunk beds and letting them choose the decorations. Lily had picked purple walls and glow-in-the-dark stars for the ceiling. Marcus had insisted on a superhero theme for his side of the room. They looked so small in their beds, so peaceful. Lily was clutching the stuffed elephant Jessica had given her for her 7th birthday. Marcus had kicked off his covers, as usual, and was sprawled across his mattress like a starfish. As I tucked Marcus back in and adjusted Lily's blanket, I thought about what my mother had said, about building myself into someone who could handle this responsibility. Looking at these 2 sleeping children who had lost so much and trusted me with their future, I felt the weight of that responsibility settle on my shoulders again. But for the first time in months, it didn't feel crushing. It felt purposeful. I went to my bedroom and pulled out Jessica's letter, the one I'd read dozens of times but still couldn't quite believe was real. Her handwriting was shaky from the medication, but her words were clear and decisive. "Sarah," it began, "if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you've agreed to take care of my most precious gifts. I know this isn't what you planned for your life, but I also know you're the only person I trust to give Lily and Marcus what they need. You're going to doubt yourself. You're going to wonder if you're doing it right, if they'd be better off with someone else, if you're equipped for this. Let me tell you something. There is no manual for this. There's no perfect way to be a parent. There's just love, consistency, and showing up every day. You've been showing up for people your whole life, Sarah. You showed up for me when I was building my company and didn't know what I was doing. You showed up when I was scared about being a single mother. You showed up during my diagnosis, my treatment, my final months. You know how to show up. The company is yours now. But more importantly, so are my children. Not because I had no other choice, but because I can't imagine anyone better suited to help them become who they're meant to be. Don't try to replace me. Be yourself. Be the Sarah who taught me how to read financial statements and who stayed up all night helping me prepare for investor meetings. Be the Sarah who remembers every birthday and who listens without judgment. Be the Sarah who builds things that last. Build a life with them, Sarah. build a family, build a future. I know you can do it because I've watched you build everything else you've ever set your mind to. The house in Palo Alto is waiting for you. The kids' rooms are exactly as they left them. There's a garden in the back that Lily loves, and a treehouse that Marcus is finally tall enough to climb into safely. There's space for all of you to grow. I love you, and I trust you. Now trust yourself. Always, Jessica. P.S. There's one more thing I need to tell you about the company. Something I never mentioned, because I wasn't sure it would happen. Check with David Chen, my lawyer, no relation despite the name, about the Morrison acquisition. If it goes through, everything changes. Everything. I'd read that postscript 100 times, wondering what Jessica had meant. David Chen had been cryptic when I'd asked, saying only that there were developments that needed to be discussed in person. It was one of the reasons I needed to get to California soon. As I folded the letter and put it back in my nightstand drawer, I heard a soft knock on my bedroom door. "Sarah?" Lily's voice was small and sleepy. "Come in, sweetheart." She padded into my room in her purple pajamas, clutching her elephant. I had a dream about Mommy. I patted the bed beside me, and she climbed up, curling against my side like she'd done dozens of times over the past 3 months. "A good dream or a sad dream?" "Both," she said quietly. She was telling me it was okay to be happy here, with you, but I miss her. "I miss her too," I said, stroking her hair. "It's okay to miss her and be happy at the same time. Your mom would want you to be happy. She told me in the dream that we're going to move to our old house. Is that true?" I looked down at this brave little girl who had lost her mother, but was still trying to take care of everyone around her. "Would you like that?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "I want to show you my room and the garden and the place where Mommy and I used to read stories. And Marcus misses his treehouse." "Then yes," I said, making the decision that had been building for months. "We're going home." The week between Christmas and New Year's passed in a whirlwind of phone calls, arrangements, and difficult conversations. I'd made the decision to move to California, but actually making it happen was proving more complicated than I'd anticipated. My biggest challenge wasn't logistics. It was my job. I'd built my financial advisory practice over 8 years, cultivating relationships with clients who trusted me with their life savings and retirement plans. Walking away wasn't just a professional decision. It felt like abandoning people who depended on me. "You could keep some of your major clients," my business partner David suggested during our meeting on December 28th. "Handle them remotely. Video calls, quarterly visits to Chicago." I shook my head, looking out at the gray Chicago skyline from our downtown office. It wouldn't be fair to them. They deserve someone who can be here when they need advice, not someone managing their portfolios between school pickups and board meetings. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying I need to transition all my clients to other advisors in the firm. I'll help with the handoffs, make sure everyone's comfortable with their new advisor, but I can't do this halfway." David leaned back in his chair, studying me. "You know you're walking away from a 7-figure income, right? I mean, I know you've inherited money, but still, it's not about the money," I said, and realized I meant it. 3 months ago, the idea of leaving my lucrative practice would have been unthinkable. Now, it felt like the obvious choice. It's about being present for what matters. That afternoon, I started making the calls. Each conversation was harder than the last, explaining to clients who'd trusted me for years that I was moving across the country to raise 2 children and run a tech company. Some were understanding. Others were hurt, feeling abandoned. Mrs. Patterson, an 80-year-old widow whose portfolio I'd been managing for 6 years, was the hardest. "But dear," she said, her voice trembling slightly over the phone, "you know all about Harold's pension and my medical expenses. How can I start over with someone new? Mrs. Patterson, I'm going to personally introduce you to Jennifer Walsh. She's brilliant, and I'll make sure she understands every detail of your situation. You'll be in excellent hands." "It won't be the same," she said quietly, and I felt my heart break a little. "No," I admitted, "it won't be the same. But sometimes we have to make changes that feel scary because they're leading us toward something important. These children you're taking care of, they're lucky to have you." "I'm the lucky one," I said, and meant it. While I was dismantling my professional life in Chicago, the kids and I were also preparing for the emotional transition. Lily had been excited about returning to California, but as the reality set in, she was having second thoughts. "What if my friends don't remember me?" she asked one evening as we packed her books. What if they have new best friends now? Then you'll remind them how awesome you are, I said, taping up another box. And if they've made new friends, that just means there are more people to play with. Marcus, meanwhile, was worried about more practical matters. Will Mrs. Rodriguez come with us? No, sweetheart. Mrs. Rodriguez lives here in Chicago, but we'll video call her all the time, and maybe she can come visit us in California. But who will make me hot chocolate when you're at work? It was a fair question. Mrs. Rodriguez had become such an integral part of our routine that I hadn't fully considered how much we'd relied on her. In California, I'd need to find new childcare, new routines, new support systems. We'll figure it out together, I said, which had become my standard answer to most of their questions. We're good at figuring things out, aren't we? On December 30th, I finally got the call I'd been waiting for from David Chen, Jessica's lawyer. Sarah, I need you to come to California as soon as possible. The Morrison acquisition I mentioned, it's happening. They want to finalize everything by January 15th. What exactly is the Morrison acquisition? I asked, settling into my desk chair with a notepad. Morrison Tech is one of the largest consulting firms on the West Coast. They've been trying to acquire Jessica's company for 2 years, but she always refused. Now they're making an offer that's substantial. How substantial? $47 million. I nearly dropped the phone. I'm sorry, what? $47 million. For the company, the client contracts, the proprietary software Jessica developed, everything. It would make you and the children very wealthy, Sarah. Generationally wealthy. I sat in stunned silence, trying to process the number. $47 million. It was more money than I could even conceptualize. But here's the thing, David continued. The offer expires on January 15th, and they want to meet with you in person before they'll finalize anything. They need to know that Jessica's successor can handle the transition. What if I don't want to sell? Then you'd be turning down $47 million to run a company you've never managed before in an industry you're still learning about. But I could learn. Jessica believed I could do it. She did. And maybe you could. But Sarah, this isn't just about you anymore. This is about Lily and Marcus's future. $47 million, properly invested, would ensure they never have to worry about money for the rest of their lives. That night, after the kids were asleep, I called my father. $47 million? He repeated, his voice incredulous. Sarah, that's life-changing money. I know. But Jessica built that company from nothing. She poured her heart into it. Selling it feels like betraying her memory. Or it feels like securing her children's future, he said gently. What do you think she would want? I thought about Jessica's letter, about her instructions to build a life with Lily and Marcus. Would she want me to struggle with a company I wasn't sure I could handle? Or would she want me to take the money and focus entirely on raising her children? I don't know, I admitted. I honestly don't know. When do you have to decide? I need to be in California by January 3rd for the meetings. The decision has to be made by the 15th. Then you have time to think about it. Time to see the company, meet the people, understand what you'd really be taking on. After I hung up, I sat in my living room surrounded by boxes, looking at the life I was about to leave behind. 3 months ago, I'd been a successful financial advisor with a predictable routine and a clear 5-year plan. Now I was about to move across the country with 2 children to either run a tech company or become one of the wealthiest women in America. The irony wasn't lost on me. My family had spent years worrying that I'd never have a legacy, never have anything meaningful to pass down. Now I was facing a decision that would determine not just my future, but the futures of 2 children who had already lost so much. As I turned off the lights and headed to bed, I realized that this wasn't just about money or business decisions. This was about the kind of life I wanted to build with Lily and Marcus, the kind of mother I wanted to be, the kind of legacy I wanted to leave. And I had less than 2 weeks to figure it all out. January 2nd found us on a plane to San Francisco, our entire lives packed into 8 suitcases and a dozen boxes that would be shipped separately. Lily pressed her face against the window as we descended, pointing out landmarks she remembered, while Marcus clutched my hand and asked for the 10th time if we were really going to live in his old house. Yes, sweetheart, I assured him. We're going home. The word still felt strange in my mouth. Home had been my Chicago apartment for 5 years. But as our taxi wound through the familiar streets of Palo Alto, past the Stanford campus, and into the tree-lined neighborhood where Jessica had built her life, I felt something shift inside me. The house was exactly as Jessica had described in her letter. A beautiful craftsman-style home with a wraparound porch and a garden that even in January showed signs of careful tending. Lily was out of the car before I'd even paid the driver, running up the front steps to the door she'd walked through every day for the first 8 years of her life. "It's exactly the same," she called back to us, her voice filled with wonder and relief. Marcus was more cautious, hanging back as I unlocked the front door with the keys David Chen had given me. When we stepped inside, I understood his hesitation. The house still smelled like Jessica, her favorite vanilla candles, the lavender sachets she kept in the linen closets, the faint scent of the jasmine tea she drank every morning. "Mommy's pictures are still here," Marcus whispered, pointing to the family photos that lined the hallway. I knelt down beside him, following his gaze to a picture of Jessica, with both kids at the beach, all 3 of them laughing at something outside the frame. "Of course they are. This is your house, and she's your mommy. The pictures stay." That seemed to reassure him, and he took my hand as we explored the rest of the house. Lily had already disappeared upstairs to her room, and I could hear her moving around, reacquainting herself with her space. The house was larger than I'd expected. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a spacious kitchen that opened onto a family room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the garden. Jessica's home office was on the first floor, and I could see her personality in every detail. The organized bookshelves, the whiteboard covered with business strategies, the framed photo of her with Lily and Marcus on her desk. "Sarah!" Lily's voice echoed from upstairs. "Come see my room." I found her in a purple bedroom that looked like it had been designed by an 8-year-old's dreams. The walls were covered with her artwork, her bookshelf was filled with well-loved stories, and her desk still had a half-finished puzzle spread across it. "Mommy said she was keeping everything exactly the same until I came home," Lily said, running her hands over her bedspread. She kept her promise. Marcus's room was across the hall, a superhero paradise with a race car bed and action figures arranged on every surface. But it was the view from his window that made him gasp with delight. "My tree house!" he shouted, pressing his face against the glass. "It's still there!" I looked out to see an elaborate treehouse nestled in the branches of an enormous oak tree. It was clearly Jessica's handiwork, sturdy, safe, but magical enough to capture a little boy's imagination. "Can we go see it?" Marcus asked. "After we unpack," I promised, "and after I figure out where everything is." That evening, after we'd ordered pizza and started the process of settling in, I sat in Jessica's office, my office now, and tried to wrap my head around what I'd inherited. Her computer was password protected, but David Chen had given me all the access codes. As I scrolled through her files, I began to understand the scope of what she'd built. Chen Consulting wasn't just a tech company. It was a bridge between old and new, helping traditional businesses navigate the digital transformation that was reshaping every industry. Jessica's client list read like a who's who of American business: manufacturing companies, retail chains, financial institutions, even government agencies. The Morrison acquisition offer was sitting in my email inbox, 47 pages of legal documents that would transfer ownership of everything Jessica had built to a corporation that would probably strip it for parts and absorb the valuable pieces into their existing structure. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. "Sarah, it's David Chen. How was the flight?" "Long, but we made it. The kids are settling in well." "Good. I wanted to give you a heads up about tomorrow's meeting. Morrison is sending their CEO, their head of acquisitions, and their chief technology officer. They're serious about this deal. What should I expect? They'll want to understand the company's operations, meet key employees, review the client contracts, but mostly they'll want to assess you. They need to know that the transition will be smooth, that clients won't jump ship if Jessica's not there anymore. And if I decide not to sell?" There was a pause. "Then you'll be running a $12 million company with over 100 employees and some very demanding clients. Are you prepared for that?" I looked around Jessica's office, at the business plans and client files and strategic documents that represented years of her life's work. "I don't know, but I'm going to find out." After I hung up, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Lily appeared in the doorway, wearing her pajamas and carrying her stuffed elephant. "I can't sleep," she said. "It's too quiet." I knew what she meant. The house felt empty without Jessica's presence, despite all the familiar objects and photos. "Want to sit with me for a while?" She climbed into the chair beside Jessica's desk, curling up like a cat. Are you going to work in Mommy's office now? I think so. Is that okay with you? She considered this seriously. Mommy always said this was where she made important decisions. She said the desk helped her think. What kind of important decisions? Like when she decided to start the company, and when she decided to move to this house, and when she decided to ask you to take care of us. The weight of that last decision settled on my shoulders again. Jessica had sat in this very chair, probably looking at the same family photos on the desk, and decided to entrust me with the most important things in her life. Lily, I said carefully, how would you feel if I sold Mommy's company? She looked up at me with those serious 8-year-old eyes. Would we still live here? Yes, we'd still live here, and you'd still go to your old school, and everything would stay the same. We'd just have more money. Do we need more money? It was such a simple question, but it cut right to the heart of everything I'd been wrestling with. Did we need $47 million? We already had more than enough to live comfortably, to pay for college, to travel, to give the kids every opportunity they could want. No, I said honestly. We don't need more money. Then why would you sell it? Because running a company is hard work. It means long hours and difficult decisions and a lot of responsibility. It might mean less time with you and Marcus. Lily was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Mommy worked a lot, she said finally. But she always said it was worth it, because she was building something important, something that helped people. She was right about that. And she said that when you build something important, you don't give up on it just because it's hard. Out of the mouths of babes. I looked at this wise little girl who had already learned more about loss and resilience than most adults ever would, and I felt something crystallize in my mind. You're right, I said. You're absolutely right. So you're not going to sell it? I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out if I can build something important too. The Morrison Tech offices occupied 3 floors of a gleaming glass building in downtown San Francisco. As I walked into the conference room at 9 a.m. sharp on January 3rd, I felt every inch the outsider I was. A financial advisor from Chicago about to negotiate with some of the most powerful people in Silicon Valley. The Morrison team was already seated around a polished conference table that probably cost more than most people's cars. CEO Richard Morrison was exactly what I'd expected. Mid-50s, silver hair, the kind of confident bearing that came from decades of successful deals. His head of acquisitions, Patricia Wells, was younger, but no less intimidating, with sharp eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of my appearance. The CTO, James Liu, looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Ms. Mitchell. Morrison stood and extended his hand. Thank you for coming. Please, have a seat. I settled into the chair across from them, acutely aware that I was about to discuss the future of Jessica's life's work with people who saw it as nothing more than a profitable acquisition. First, let me express our condolences on the loss of Ms. Chen, Morrison began. She was a formidable businesswoman and a worthy competitor. Thank you, I said simply. Now let's talk about the future. We've reviewed Chen Consulting's financials, client base, and proprietary technology. It's an impressive operation, but we both know it's at a critical juncture. Without Jessica's leadership, there are significant risks. Patricia Wells leaned forward. Client retention is our primary concern. Jessica had personal relationships with most of your major accounts. They trusted her vision, her expertise. The question is whether they'll trust yours. What makes you think they won't? I asked. No offense, Ms. Mitchell, but you're a financial advisor. You've never run a tech company, never managed a team of developers, never had to explain complex digital transformation strategies to Fortune 500 CEOs. She wasn't wrong, but her dismissive tone rankled. You're right. I haven't done those things, but I have spent 5 years consulting for Jessica's company. I understand her business model, her client relationships, her strategic vision, and I've spent 8 years helping high-net-worth individuals make complex financial decisions under pressure. James Liu spoke up for the first time. The technology side is what concerns me most. Jessica developed some proprietary software that's integral to how the company operates. Do you understand the technical architecture? Could you guide future development? I understand enough to know what I don't know, I said honestly. And I'm smart enough to hire people who can fill those gaps. Morrison smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. That's exactly the kind of thinking that leads to failed acquisitions and disappointed clients. This isn't about hiring consultants to patch holes in your knowledge. This is about leadership, vision, the ability to make strategic decisions that affect hundreds of millions of dollars in client assets. Which brings us to our offer, Patricia said, sliding a folder across the table. $47 million, cash, for complete acquisition of Chen Consulting. All assets, all contracts, all intellectual property. Your role would be as a transition consultant for 6 months, helping us integrate the client relationships. After that, you'd be free to pursue other opportunities. I opened the folder and scanned the terms. It was more money than I'd ever imagined having, enough to secure Lily and Marcus's futures beyond anything Jessica could have dreamed. But as I read the fine print, I saw what this really was, the dismantling of everything Jessica had built. What happens to the employees? I asked. We'll retain key personnel, Morrison said. The rest will receive generous severance packages. How generous? And how do you define key personnel? Patricia's smile was razor thin. That would be determined during the integration process. So you're asking me to sell Jessica's company knowing that you'll probably fire half her employees and strip the rest for parts. We're asking you to be realistic about your capabilities, Morrison said, his tone hardening slightly. You inherited a complex business that requires expertise you don't possess. We're offering you a way to honor Jessica's legacy while ensuring her children's financial security. And if I refuse, then you'll be responsible for whatever happens next. Client defections, employee departures, declining revenues. Is that really what Jessica would have wanted? The meeting continued for another hour, with Morrison's team systematically dismantling every argument I could make for keeping the company independent. They had data on industry consolidation trends, statistics on failed succession plans, examples of other companies that had collapsed after their founders died. By the time I left their offices, I felt like I'd been put through a professional shredder, but I also felt something else. Angry. I drove straight to Chen Consulting's offices in Palo Alto, a converted warehouse that buzzed with the kind of creative energy I'd only read about in business magazines. Jessica's assistant, Maria Santos, met me at the reception desk. Ms. Mitchell, we've been so excited to meet you. Jessica talked about you constantly. She did? Oh, yes. She always said you were the smartest person she knew when it came to understanding what really mattered in business. Not just the numbers, but the people behind them. Maria gave me a tour of the offices, introducing me to developers, project managers, client relations specialists, and administrative staff. Each person had stories about Jessica, how she'd mentored them, supported their ideas, created an environment where innovation thrived. She never made us feel like just employees, said Tom Rodriguez, the lead developer. She made us feel like we were building something important together. What's going to happen to us now? Asked Sarah Kim, a project manager who couldn't have been older than 25. There are rumors about Morrison trying to buy the company. I looked around the room at these talented, dedicated people who had helped Jessica build something extraordinary. I don't know yet, I said honestly. But I promise you'll be the first to know when I decide. That afternoon, I sat in Jessica's office, my office, and made a list of everything I'd need to learn to run this company effectively. It was daunting. Technology development, client management, team leadership, strategic planning, competitive analysis. The list filled 2 pages. Then I made another list. Everything I already knew that could help. Financial analysis, risk assessment, strategic thinking, relationship building, crisis management. This list was shorter, but each item represented years of experience and hard-won expertise. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. How did the meeting go? Are you going to sell? I stared at the message for a long time before responding, still deciding. It's complicated. But as I sat there surrounded by Jessica's vision boards and business plans, watching her employees work with passion and purpose through the glass walls of my office, I realized it wasn't complicated at all. It was terrifying. It was overwhelming. It was probably the biggest professional risk I'd ever take, but it wasn't complicated. That evening, as I helped Lily with her homework and listened to Marcus tell me about every detail of his treehouse exploration, I thought about legacy. Not the financial legacy that Morrison was offering, but the legacy of building something meaningful, something that mattered. How was your first day at Mommy's company? Lily asked as I tucked her into bed. Challenging, I said, but good. I met a lot of people who loved your mom very much. Are you going to take care of them too? The question hit me like a physical blow. In all my agonizing over the decision, I'd been thinking about money and risk and my own capabilities. But Lily had cut straight to the heart of it with the wisdom that only children possess. Jessica hadn't just left me her children and her company. She'd left me her people, the employees who depended on their jobs, the clients who trusted the company with their digital transformations, the community she'd built around her vision. Yes, I said, the decision crystallizing as I spoke. I'm going to take care of them too. Good, Lily said, settling back into her pillow. That's what Mommy would want. As I turned off her light and headed downstairs to call David Chen, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Certainty. Not about whether I could succeed, but about what I had to try to do. Morrison Tech was about to learn that Jessica Chen had chosen her successor very carefully indeed. 6 months later, I stood in the same conference room where Morrison Tech had tried to convince me to sell Jessica's company. But this time, I was the one calling the meeting. Ms. Mitchell, Richard Morrison said as he entered, his confident demeanor noticeably subdued. Thank you for agreeing to see us. Patricia Wells and James Liu followed behind him, their expressions carefully neutral. The dynamic had shifted dramatically since our last encounter, and we all knew it. Please sit down, I said, gesturing to the chairs across from me. Maria Santos sat beside me, no longer just Jessica's former assistant, but now my chief operating officer, one of many internal promotions that had strengthened our team. I'll get straight to the point, Morrison began. We'd like to discuss a partnership opportunity. I almost smiled. 6 months ago, they'd been offering to buy us out and dismantle everything Jessica had built. Now they wanted to partner with us. What kind of partnership? I asked, though I already knew where this was heading. We have several clients who need exactly the kind of digital transformation expertise that Chen Consulting provides, Patricia said. We'd like to refer them to you, with appropriate compensation arrangements. You mean the clients you lost when your acquisition strategy backfired? Maria asked sweetly. The truth was, Morrison's aggressive expansion had alienated several major clients who preferred Chen Consulting's more personalized approach. When word got out that they'd tried to acquire us, 3 of their biggest accounts had switched to us instead. We prefer to think of it as recognizing the value of specialized expertise, James Liu said diplomatically. I leaned back in my chair, thinking about how much had changed since that first terrifying day when I'd walked into Jessica's office as the new CEO. The learning curve had been steep. There had been sleepless nights studying technology trends, difficult conversations with skeptical clients, and moments when I'd wondered if Morrison had been right about my capabilities. But there had also been victories. We'd landed 2 major new clients, developed an innovative software solution, and expanded our team by 30%. Most importantly, we'd maintained the culture Jessica had created. I appreciate the offer, I said finally, but we're not interested in a partnership with Morrison Tech. Morrison's face tightened. Ms. Mitchell, I think you're making a mistake. The market is becoming increasingly competitive. You're right about the competition. I agreed. Which is why we've decided to expand internationally. We're opening offices in London and Tokyo next year. The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia Wells looked like she'd swallowed something unpleasant. How? She asked finally. The same way Jessica built this company in the first place. By focusing on what our clients need and delivering exceptional results. I stood up, signaling that the meeting was over. Thank you for coming. After they left, Maria and I sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Jessica would be proud, she said finally. I hope so. Some days I still feel like I'm making it up as I go along. That's what leadership is, Maria said with a smile. Jessica used to say that confidence wasn't about knowing all the answers. It was about being willing to find them. That evening, I drove home to the house that had truly become home. The garden was blooming with spring flowers that Lily and I had planted together. Marcus's treehouse had been upgraded with a rope ladder and telescope. How was work? Lily asked as I walked through the door. At 9 years old, she was already showing signs of Jessica's analytical mind. Good. Really good. We turned down a business proposal that wasn't right for us. Like when I turned down Tommy Peterson's birthday party because he's mean to Marcus? Exactly like that, I said, marveling at her ability to distill complex business decisions into simple moral choices. Marcus came running in from the backyard, covered in dirt and grinning. Mom! I saw a hawk from my treehouse! The word mom had evolved naturally over the past few months, and hearing it still made my heart skip a beat. As we sat down for dinner, I looked at these two incredible children who had changed my life in ways I never could have imagined. "I have some news," I said. "Remember how I told you the company was doing really well? We're going to expand to other countries, like Mommy always wanted to do." "Will you have to travel a lot?" Marcus asked, worried. "Some, but never for more than a few days. And Mrs. Rodriguez will stay with you. Plus, when you're older, maybe you can come with me sometimes." Their eyes lit up at the possibility of international travel. Later that night, I sat in my office and began typing an email to David Chen about the international expansion and establishing the Jessica Chen Foundation for Women in Technology. Jessica always said that success meant lifting others up with you. As I hit send, I thought about that Christmas Eve dinner when my family had mocked me for not having children or a legacy. The dynamic had shifted completely. I was no longer the family disappointment. I was the woman who'd found a way to have both career and family in ways none of us had imagined possible. My phone buzzed with a text. "Saw the news about your expansion in TechCrunch. Impressive work. R. Morrison." I smiled and deleted the message without responding. As I headed upstairs, I paused at the kids' bedroom doors. Lily was reading by flashlight under her covers. Marcus was sprawled across his bed, completely at peace. These children who had lost so much had given me everything I never knew I wanted. A purpose beyond profit margins. A family defined not by biology, but by choice and love. A legacy that would matter long after quarterly reports were forgotten. Jessica had been right. I was exactly the person her children needed, and they were exactly what I needed too. We'd built something together. Not just a successful company, but a life that honored her memory while creating our own future. 6 months ago, I'd told my family I'd inherited 2 children and a fortune. What I hadn't known then was that I'd also inherited something far more valuable, the chance to become the person I was always meant to be. And that was the greatest gift Jessica could have given any of us.